just by way of introduction, to repeat what's in here, but only to say that Elizabeth is very distinguished in the sense that she has a long career as a journalist. She was also the Minister of Information in Ghana, so she has an incredible breadth of experience to bring to us. Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Crack on.
Thank you very much. And I do apologize you can't see my face, but you aren't missing anything.
If it's any consolation, we have a very nice picture of you.
Oh, okay.
No, I said it's a nice one.
Let's go. I find that the traditional attitude to sex in many African societies that I know appears to be one of live and let live. The imaginatively punitive laws that are emerging in some countries on the continent and seek to penalize LGBT are mostly developed and fashioned by extremists and religious fanatics in developed countries. And so we have a number of problems in trying to deal with this question. There is evidence to suggest that Ugandan legislation in particular had help from American evangelicals. They bring to us what has failed to pass in state legislatures in the US, and the other side of the debate then proceeds to punish us for adopting these legislations. Before our very eyes, we've all seen President Barack Obama evolve his views on same-sex marriage from marriage is a union between a man and a woman to his current campaign for the rights of same-sex marriage and his determination to punish those who are at different stages of evolution in their thinking on the issue. I have a difficulty also in coping with the changing scenario of what it is we are talking about. It would be useful if the donor nations made up their minds about exactly what they are asking African nations to sign up to on the subject of LGBT rights. Every day, a new variant emerges. Today's conference is about LGBT, which I think stands for lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgender. I notice that more initials are added regularly. I have seen LGBTQQIP2SAA, which I'm told stands for lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, pansexual, two-spirited, asexual, and ally. I've no doubt there are more variations on the theme that are yet unknown to me and are likely to emerge later. Do we then fall foul of breaching the rights of these groups each time a new variant is discovered and added to the list? Now let's get to the basics and ask the question. What is aid for? Why does a nation give its taxpayers money to another nation? Or let's be specific and come to the crux of the matter. What are the aid donors hoping to achieve when they give money to an African country? Let me offer some answers. They are aiming, I hope, to reduce poverty, help develop African countries, and stop the scene of emaciated African children on their television sets. That upsets everybody and puts people off their dinner. They are also hoping to help create an atmosphere in the African countries that would enable the citizens to flourish where they are and hopefully stop desperate young Africans trying to enter Europe and drowning off the coast of Italy, or entering Europe in huge numbers and create racial tensions. The concept of one country giving aid to another one can be said to have originated from the Western world. You lead the world in giving development aid, and when it comes to humanitarian aid, you have no challenges. I take the view that there should never be any sense of entitlement on the part of recipients of aid, and the donors should feel free to give or not to give. We get into problems when donors or recipients pretend that the relationship is anything but one of a giver and a taker. But it will be helpful for both sides to operate on the basis that the giving of aid should not be a permanent feature of their relationship, but a transient one to give the developing countries a chance to develop and become self-sufficient. The English-speaking nations that have taken the lead in promoting LGBT rights around the world have themselves evolved into their current positions. They did not start with these positions. Indeed, the criminalization of homosexuality was brought into our societies by British colonialism and the religions that were introduced from outside the continent. Now that these countries, who are the donor nations today, have evolved into their current positions, they want their new positions to be accepted, or we risk losing whatever aid would be on offer. I happen to believe that the respect of human rights should be demanded from all nations. But are we suggesting that the respect of LGBT rights is the most important of all rights? Of all the human rights abuses that citizens are subjected to in many African countries, why pick on LGBT rights alone? For example, disabled people have a hard time in many African countries and have never heard anybody threaten the withdrawal of aid unless disability rights are respected. If it is LGBT rights that the donors have decided to highlight, surely we need to have a conversation and not be made to feel we are being forced into accepting a particular position. 100 years ago, there were no such things as LGBT rights in the UK, for example. And I suggest that better education, better health care, and a better standard of life generally in the UK probably has something to do with the emergence of a majority opinion for LGBT rights today. In much the same way, I suggest an improved quality of life in developing countries might very well lead to a better appreciation of LGBT rights. Let me quote from an editorial of February the 10th, 2014, posted by the Washington Post when the anti-gay bill was passed into law in Nigeria. And I quote, "Pressure from the international community is needed as a countervailing force. How that can work was evident recently in Uganda, a country dependent on Western aid. President Yoweri Museveni vetoed a law threatening gays with life imprisonment, even as he described them as a product of random breeding and nature goes wrong." The editorial continues. "Nigeria, the most populous country in Africa and a major oil producer, is harder to influence. But Britain still delivers hundreds of millions of dollars in development aid, while the United States buys 70% of Nigeria's oil. Both, that is, both Britain and the U.S., should be aggressively using their leverage to protect the vulnerable gay community. As a starting point, they should let Mr. Jonathan know he and his government will be unwelcome in Washington and London until the law is repealed." Unquote. Needless to point out that President Yoweri Museveni has, since the writing of this editorial, signed into law at the end of March the Anti-Homosexuality Act in Uganda. I have not heard that either President Jonathan or President Museveni have been told he and his government are unwelcome in Washington and London until the law is repealed. Back in 2011, British Prime Minister David Cameron threatened to cut British aid to governments of countries that persecute homosexuals unless they stop punishing people in same-sex relationships. Even the then president of my country, the late President John Evans Atta Mills, the man famously known for avoiding confrontation at any cost, felt provoked by this threat to call the bluff of the Prime Minister. He said, and I quote, "Homosexuality will never be legalized for as long as I remain president," unquote. Our peace-loving President Mills said, and suddenly there was an outburst of homophobic activity in Ghana. And indeed, even though not very much has been heard about this threat since then, it is cited regularly as a spark for the rise in homophobic rhetoric in many countries in Africa today. If you want to protect or enhance LGBT rights in developing countries, I would suggest the last thing to do is to link such rights to aid donation. Even those who support LGBT rights suddenly then feel they must oppose it. Please, let us do our own evolving at our own rate. Like President Obama, we will also get there. I thank you very much.